What is up, J-Base? How you doing? It's me, Rebecca J. And yes, I still do the millennial heart, not this weird ass fucking gang sign that y'all... You know what? We're getting off topic. I'm not here to drag Gen Z. So today I'm going to be doing a reaction video. If you have been on YouTube for any amount of time, you probably are familiar with the YouTube channel Jubilee. Jubilee does a lot of really fun videos. A lot of them are like conversation based, like cheaters and non-cheaters, or like flat earthers versus scientists, like, you know, just little things like that. And they'll put them all in a room and like basically just let them have a conversation. And they also do like really silly stuff like rate people's fashion or like, you know, just weird things like that. But one of their newer series that they started doing a couple years ago is called Spectrum. And it's kind of the same concept as the other videos that they've done, but they basically get people from a certain identity group and they just ask them variant questions and see, you know, it's like strongly agree, strongly disagree, and then you just kind of go line up. I was actually a participant in one of their very early videos that was the adoption video. I think this was like maybe their second or third of the Spectrum video that they did. I live in LA, so they always send out emails of like, this is what we're filming, and if you are identifying any of these things, if you want to come and you can apply to do that. So I just did that with them for a few hours, and it was a really great experience. It was cool. I liked being able to, you know, share my view and my experience, and also getting to connect with other adoptees who I still follow and we still keep in touch with to this day. So it was a really great experience. But the one I did was just a broad adoption topic. The one I'm going to react to today is specifically transracial adoption. Now, I did actually get the application for this to apply, but I decided, since I had already done one, even though it was adoption, you know, I'm always going to speak from the transracial adoption experience because that's my experience. And I also already kind of have my own platform to talk about what I want to talk about. I decided to not apply and give that opportunity to other adoptees who don't typically get this opportunity to speak about their experiences. So so I'm not in this video, and I haven't watched it yet because I was wanting to do a video on it. So I'm going to react to that video today and just kind of give my thoughts. One of the things that I will say I didn't love when I did it is I just felt like a lot of the questions were really softball questions, but that's like, I feel like that's kind of the norm for every platform that's trying to have a conversation, right? They just kind of throw softball questions out there that don't really actually challenge anything. It's just kind of like, how do you feel about blah, 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 blah? But it's not actually like hard-hitting questions that are actually going to get a real conversation going. So that's why when you watch if you watch my episode, I kind of go off script a little bit because I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I kind of go on a little bit of a rant because I'm going to say what I'm going to say, right? Like, if you don't give me the correct prompt to be able to answer what I'm going to answer, I'm going to just answer it anyway. So I'm very curious to see, because now that they've been doing this for a while, I'm curious to see if their questions have evolved. I'm also curious to see about the other adoptees' responses because, you know, not all adoptees think the same, which is the point of these videos, right? It's a spectrum. It's the whole relatable. So the first thing I'm noticing here, and this isn't a dig at Jubilee specifically, but I'm not seeing any black men being represented here. This is something that I've noticed a lot in the adoption community as, you know, social media has risen. There's a lot more adoptee voices coming forward to the front. There's not a lot of representation of black male adoptees. And I will say a lot of that is just, there's a lot of layers of why men aren't as comfortable sharing their experiences, talking about feelings and trauma and all those kinds of things. So I get it, but I do also think that there's a huge hole in the adoption experience that's not being talked about, even with this rise of adoptee creators and adoptee voices. So I do very much appreciate the black men that are out there speaking about their experiences for adoptees and foster kids and things like that. But I definitely think we need a lot more of it, because right now the industry is kind of dominated by women, specifically women of color, which is great. Women's History Month, love it. But there also is a huge chunk of voices that aren't being represented and heard because a lot of men of color, specifically black men, are not coming to the forefront or being able to share their experiences for whatever reason that may be. So
kids are more screwed up than biological kids. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm really curious about you two first.
Yeah.
I know so many biological kids that are screwed up. And they were raised in like a healthy, nuclear, cliche, white picket fence family. And I know several adopted kids that are so successful, that are doing great. I mean, Shout out Simone Biles. She went to the Olympics and she was adopted.
Can
I'm pause here. So this question I don't like, because what is the purpose of trying to compare the two? I don't really like this question, because to me it's like playing the oppression Olympics, because at the end of the day, what does it matter of who suffers more or who's more messed up than who? It doesn't matter. Traumatized kids are screwed up, period, whether they're biological kids or whether they're adoptive kids. Adoptive kids just inherently have trauma because adoption is traumatic. And then there's a lot of biological kids that can face trauma in all kinds of ways that adoptees don't face trauma. So, like, what is the point of this question, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And like, what this is kind of what I was talking about in my intro. Was like, I was really interested in what questions they were asking, because it feels like a lot of the questions, especially when I was doing it, just weren't relevant to the topic of what we're talking about. What is this conversation getting us to? Oh, adoptees are more fucked up than biological kids. Okay, and what? Or vice versa. Like, okay, and what do we do with this information?
Move, like, she changed my mind a bit. Like,
Come on!
Can I?
Yeah. I'm like, she has a point there. I can't.
No, I can strongly disagree with that.
No, because like the thing is, she changed my mind on that, because like as a foster kid and like somebody who went through all that, we are up. You know, like we go through so much, like through that whole process, seeing and feeling neglected from like the foster parents. But I don't let my past, where I grew up, like define who I am to make me screwed up.
But that's true
Yeah,
for
so
anybody.
I'm on strongly agree, because I've been through a few therapeutic boarding schools, wilderness programs. One of them, I remember, it's a place where wealthy parents send their children, so it's privilege. And even with all that privilege, everybody there was messed up, just saying like they weren't stable, whether it was a drug addiction or just like bad temper or violence. Adoptees all carry this trauma. Maybe it has something to do with identity and not knowing a lot about our background. Well, some of us not knowing a lot about our background. I think like we don't even have a birthday. And me personally going through that and growing up in a colorblind environment, it's kind of like we were left to fend for ourselves.
On that note that you said about birthdays, a lot of adoptees, especially if it's an international adoption, the agencies do not keep track of their birthdays. Like, for example, my sister, who's adopted from Ethiopia, they just told her to pick a birthday because they literally don't keep track. So many people, being able to have like even information on your adoption is a privilege. And I know that sounds crazy, but like even for me, having a closed adoption, like even just having the paperwork of like what agency I went through, that is a privilege, because some people literally have zero information. Even knowing what state my birth family was in is a huge privilege for me. A lot of people don't have that. So many of my cousins who are adopted internationally, they didn't have birthdays. They didn't know how old they were. They judged their age based on bone density. And then they're just like, just pick a name, pick a birthday, and we're just gonna wing it. It's like, what are y'all doing over here? So she's very much true on that. But I think on this whole, I don't know. I think this whole question in general, again, is like, what is the purpose of this question? Because we can play the oppression Olympics all day, every day, and at the end of the day, where does it get us? Everything, like neither side is wrong, because both biological kids and adoptees can have extensive amounts of trauma. So like neither side is wrong. I guess my thing is just like what is this discussion bringing for us?
Thank you for sharing, by the way. I look at this question through two lenses. The adopted community as a whole is 4 times more at risk of suicide than non-adopted counterparts.
It's very true.
I think that adopted kids are more at risk for struggle, not because of us, but because of society and because of the dominant narrative of white saviorism that is all surrounding adoption. We all know this narrative, but the narrative for those that don't know is this notion of adoptees should feel lucky, adoptees must be grateful, and gratitude is related to this idea of repayment. The effect of that is that we as adoptees, as a whole community, feel like we're less worth than our non-adopted counterparts. It makes us feel like you should repay your life that you were given. You should repay the fortunes that were given to you. And for little kids, how can we repay something that's immeasurable?
And also we shouldn't have to, because we didn't
And it's
have
not
to be
fair for
adopted.
us as little kids to
Like-
have that weight, that burden on us while growing up. And because we have that weight, because we have that burden, that's what, so to speak, messes us up.
Yeah, what he said is absolutely true. Literally everything that he said, I absolutely co-sign. Those are all issues that adoptees speak about and are very true. This idea that adoptees need to be grateful and that basically you have a debt to society or to your adoptive family because they adopted you. It's all bullshit. Like, we don't get a choice, and that we are the only people, arguably the only people in the adoption triad that y'all love to quote, who literally get no decision in our adoption process, right? And also I have an argument for that a lot of birth families don't either, but that's a video for another day. And actually I can talk about that specifically for my own biological mother. Now that we have met and been able to talk a lot more, I've learned that there was a lot more lying and manipulation that went on than what we knew about. But again, a video for another day.
Transracial adoption should not be allowed. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, before they even start, I have a lot to say about this. Inherently, transracial adoption is going to happen as long as adoption exists, right? Because there's just never going to be a one-to-one ratio of families versus children. However, there is a lot that needs to change before people should be allowed to transracially adopt. Like, there needs to be actual mandatory requirements for people to adopt transracially, especially if you are a white person adopting a child of color. There's a lot of calls to end adoption, period, from a lot of adoptees that are talking about how adoption is slavery and human trafficking, and it is. We also understand that there needs to be something in place. We're not stupid, right? We know that there has to be some sort of an adoption or a foster system to exist, because there's just always going to be people who either cannot care for the children or do not want to care for the children, especially now that y'all have overturned Roe v. Wade and are now forcing women to have babies that they don't want or can't take care of. So, which you can call it a conspiracy if you want, but I am very much of the belief has a lot to do with the fact that there is a shortage of infants and a high demand of people looking to adopt infants. So now you guys have overturned Roe v. Wade, forcing people to have children that they don't want or cannot take care of, so that you can now fill your supply and meet the demands for kids. But again, a video for another day, but y'all not slick, okay? We see you. It's not that transracial adoption necessarily shouldn't be allowed. It should, number one, be an absolute last resort, and number two, there needs to be a lot more actual legal federal requirements around transracial adoption in general, before you should ever be allowed to adopt transracially, because y'all out here wilding.
I mean, I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
We're all transracial adoptees. That would be saying that
all
you would
would
be
strongly
against
disagree.
your own adoption. And I think I just want to add also, it's different from being colorblind. That's not why I'm here, just to clarify.
Okay, theoretically, let's say we were on agree for one reason. Do you guys have any gripes against transracial adoption?
Well, yeah, like I guess like what I just said a little bit.
Savior complex.
Savior complex?
I mean, there are people in the world who I think view transracial adoption as this like, oh, I'm doing a cool thing. Like, I've met people who have said those specific things where they're like, I've always just wanted a black child, but that's it. There's no like, why do you want a black child? Or, or like, it was like a savior mentality almost. And I do think that it's really important, as the further we go, to have that education and to not go in with it with a colorblind stance, because it does do a lot more harm, at least it did for me growing up, than just slightly opening up your kids to the culture that they came from.
Yeah, no, you really spoke to something. All my friends that are black or Arabic have all this culture that they grew up with, and they like years and years of like learning stuff, and that's what I missed out on. So for the future generations and people who are adopting right now, I think the biggest thing would be to stop being colorblind.
I agree that everybody deserves a set of parents, family. Everybody deserves to be loved and nurtured and cared for. However, the recent legislation that almost didn't pass, I guess, for ICWA, which is the Indigenous Child Welfare Act, being Native American and not adopted by Native Americans, I don't know anything. You know, there's so much about my life that just didn't make sense until I went out and learned it myself. So I feel like that small community of Native children need to stay with other Natives. It doesn't have to be the same tribe, but just keep them Native, because, you know, our population's declining.
I mean, I am sitting here where I am, but I do think it is a little bit of a privileged place to be standing, because I think the reality of adoption in the US and culture in the US is that it's very hard to be a person of color here in this country. You know, my parents were white. My parents being white will never understand what it's like to be a person of color in the US.
Yeah.
A huge
And
barrier
they're
for
not going to
people
be
of
able to
color
connect with
adopt
me
that is
in
not
that
applied
way,
to white
which
people.
is kind of a big deal. Now, there are other things that they do really, really well, but the reality is living here is kind of tough for a person of color, and they can recognize that for me, but they can't know what my experience
And
is.
they never will.
A little bit about my adopted parents. They're both white French Canadians. My parents were infertile. They couldn't have their own children. But my mother always had a strong need to be a mother and to have a family. So I think, yeah, it's always been important. So it was children, or it had to be.
Okay, let's mix it up.
There's no shade to you, sister. If you've watched my TikToks and Instagram videos, I just have a really big issue with people using infertility as an excuse to take other people's children. Nobody's entitled to be a parent, period. I don't care who you are. I don't care what medical issues you have. I don't care if you're queer. I'm queer too. Nobody's entitled to kids. Those adoptions quite literally only exist because of infertile women, white women to be exact, where they would take children from poor women who couldn't say no and couldn't fight for themselves, right? They would steal people's kids and give them to infertile white women who were embarrassed for the fact that they couldn't have kids. And the whole reason that they started doing closed adoption was so that nobody could trace where that baby came from. They couldn't ask any questions. And if they did ask questions, there would be no paper trail because it's a closed adoption. I'm not making that up. Like, you can literally go cite sources. I literally did a panel on Fox Soul television talking about this with a woman who's owns a black social services agency, and she's been doing this research for 30 years. Those adoptions literally exist to traffic children for purchasing. So I have a really big issue with people who hide behind infertility as this reason to justify adoption, because it's not a justifiable reason. Adoption should only ever be used when there's no other option for that child to have a healthy and safe home, specifically with somebody who they are related to or already have a connection to, right? Kinship adoption should always be put first. Reunification should always be put first. You random bitches who either just want kids and can't have them, or just want kids and you already have kids, or want to be a white savior, you do not matter. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry to burst your bubble, but you're not important, because nobody's entitled to another human being. I'm not the one. And again, there's no shade to you, ma'am. I'm just side-eyeing your white parents for those reasons that they gave you, because that's not a valid reason. I'm so sorry.
Each of you tell me some of the crazy stuff that people have said to you as a transracial adoptee.
Okay. Who are your parents? Because my parents are white, so they never know where they are in the crowd.
Do you know your real parents, though?
What country are you originally from?
Oh, yeah. Where are you from?
I mean, all that stuff, I think probably every adoptee has experienced hearing in one way or another. But yeah, just like literally people asking how much you cost, asking where you're really from. Aren't you happy you weren't aborted? My favorite, when people love to make a joke of like, oh my God, you look just like your parents. Bitch. And like Eli said, a lot of bullshit that comes from people in your own community. And I think that's why I have a lot of empathy for adoptees who feel like left out of both communities, whether it's their white families or their cultural communities, right? Because we get a lot of bullshit from everybody. So it's like, well, where the fuck am I supposed to go? If I'm too white for black people, I'm too black for white people, then what am I supposed to do? Like, where the fuck am I supposed to go? And it just creates this more isolation and feeling of not belonging or not being accepted anywhere. And it can cause a lot of adoptees to turn against their own community, because it's like, well, white people don't like me because I'm black or Asian or whatever it is. And so I try to connect with my own community, and y'all treat me like shit too. So like, fuck everybody. And not to say that that's necessarily okay, but I understand it. Because it's a very real experience, and it's something that, this is why I think that adoption education, transracial adoption education, is important for everybody, not just white people, because a lot of people of color are also very fucking ignorant to the experiences of adoptees of color.
I'm actually 21 years old. I went through the adoption process a lot later than other people. Like, I went through the foster care system. Basically, how it all started for me, it was having a little bit of problems at the start with my own family, and it led to me being taken away from, from my own mother. So I'm Nicaraguense and I'm Honduran, and my adoptive parents, they're actually Salvadorian. And even though we are from the same branch in Central America, at the end of the day is that everybody has their different cultures. Like with Nicaragua and Honduras, like they were at war at some point, same with Nicaragua and El Salvador. So at first it was a little bit of trouble, but at the end of the day, like, they're still my family. I can still go to their house and eat on the same table with them. But like I said, I'm a proud Hispanic.
I don't know that I would classify him as a transracial adoptee. Family is still Hispanic, they're just different ethnicities within the Hispanic community. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with him being put in the transracial adoption group. I do think it's an interesting conversation that can be had with adoption cross-culturally, like within cultures, because I do think there is a lot of stuff that comes up as well, but I just don't think that transracial is the correct term for his situation.
I mean, for me, like, strongly disagree, because I'm a proud Hispanic. Like, I'm Nicaraguense and I'm Honduran, and I'm always gonna be proud of that no matter what. And I get how some people can be like, oh, my race, like, it falls in my bloodline that, like, there's alcoholism, drug addicts, but I'm never gonna let that define my anger or my percentage of how I am or how I represent myself ever.
Yes, so...
Yeah, like, this is why, and no shade to him, but I just, like, this is why I think this is not the correct classification for his situation, because he's adopted by other Hispanic people. So of course he's not going to experience those same people because he's being raised in the overall same culture, right? Whereas when you are taken out of your culture and your community and you are plopped down into a white, predominantly white culture, family, town, everything surrounding you, and you're completely stripped. I mean, it's literally colonization. When white people come in and they strip everything that is of that culture, and you're expected to just assimilate to that, right? That is why I don't think that it was appropriate to put him in this video, because he's not a transracial adoptee and it's not the same experience. Not to say that his experience isn't valid, but it is not a transracial adoption experience. He still absolutely is a valid adoption experience. Every adoptee does, but it's not a transracial adoption experience because he's not transracially adopted.
Nature is stronger than nurture.
What are these questions?
3, 2, 1,
What?
go.
Jubilee. Exactly.
Nature is stronger than nurture.
Jubilee.
So your genetics
exactly-
are stronger than how you were raised.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
This is confusing.
You said it correctly. We just
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that it's a push and pull for certain things that are nature and versus certain things that are nurture. So I don't think there's an answer for it, but in terms of transracial adoption, I do want to think about the point of why the question was asked in the first place, which I don't quite understand where the question's coming from.
Thank you.
Blood, yeah, blood versus
Thank you.
Blood versus water.
There you
This doesn't
go.
make no damn sense.
Oh, well, my tangent is a really long tangent, so I
Go
actually...
for it. I'm lost.
Go off. Then.
Okay.
Drag them.
So I totally agree that we have like different brain chemistries. Like I'm predisposed to maybe being a little bit more confident or maybe more happier, whatever it may be. There's neurodiversity. That being said, I don't like this question, and maybe this is what you're getting at. I don't like this question because I think it takes away the responsibility of community, of environment, of society, and of government. And what I mean by that is, when we were born in some place and we had no choice to be born, and then when we were displaced and brought up in a completely new environment, there is responsibility for the people closest to us and for the community and the neighborhood to be supporting and championing that person and seeing them not as the ones that are lucky or are grateful, but seeing them as the people that are strong and are resilient and people that we should champion in the society. And that's the responsibility of the people that made a choice that we didn't make as adoptees. Yeah, so I contest this question by saying, who cares about nature versus nurture?
And literally,
nurture is pretty darn important.
It literally has no fucking.
It's more important than nature.
What does it
I feel like you have to understand.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Because Jubilee, what is this question? You guys have got to get better questions. Oh my God! Literally, what does this have to do with adoptees? And I'm disappointed knowing that Adoptee directed this video, that these were the I don't know if the director comes up with the questions, but like, again, what are you trying to, what is the root that you're trying to, what is the root of the discussion that you're trying to get to? This question literally has nothing to do with adoption, especially transracial adoption. And thank you, Ben and Eli, for calling that bullshit out, because girl, what are we doing here? Thank you for joining me on that wild journey. I think overall, like, I always appreciate a platform for adoptees to talk about their experiences. I just wish the questions were more thought out and actually relevant to our experiences and actually produced a relevant discussion, because most of these questions were kind of stupid, to be quite frank. The only other thing that I think should have been vetted was the one adoptee that wasn't transracially adopted. Again, not that his experience isn't valid, it's just not at a transracial adoption experience. So I would have liked that we gave that space to somebody who actually is transracially adopted, and he could maybe do like a same culture adoption or just the adoption in general. I think would be very interesting to do a similar video to this with people who are adopted within the same race or within the same culture. I actually think that would be a really interesting video to do, because there's a lot of things that come up with adoption, period, and there's a lot of misconception that, like, oh, if you're adopted, as long as you're adopted into the same race or the same culture, then everything's hunky-dory and yippee-ki-yay. It's not. It's really not. You can send me a check for my idea. Thank you so much. But otherwise, I gave you all my thoughts, and continue to tear down the adoption industry and make it better.